Forget watching 50 more tutorials about n8n. These 7 nodes will handle practically 90% of what you as a business owner need to consider and know in order to use n8n successfully. And I'm going to show you what they are in this video. So if we jump into n8n, what we have here are these 7 nodes that I consider to be the foundations of any sort of workflow that you build. And if you can master these, you're pretty much have everything you need to start building. And if we look at this, the first one is the HTTP request. And I put this first simply because this will open up so many different possibilities in n8n that it's not even funny. Whether you want to connect to a third-party tool like, I don't know, a CRM, whether you want to send information to WhatsApp, whether you want to do pretty much anything that is outside of the realms of n8n, the HTTP request node will allow you to do that. And in general, this has a few different options. First of all, there's the method, the most common being get and post. You also sometimes use put, you also sometimes use patch. Delete obviously is pretty self-explanatory, but these allow you to get and send information to different places or from different places. So you can get information, you can insert information somewhere, you can update information, you can delete information. There's a lot of different operations that you can do. You have the URL, which is where you're going to be, or where you're going to be contacting, right? And then there is authentication. So in most cases, if you want to have this be more secure, you would have some sort of authentication set up. You can then send different things within your HTTP request. So you can send headers, such as authorization headers, for example. You can send query parameters, where you can have a key and a value pair. And there's also the body, which generally is a JSON body, but there are also different types: form data, binary, raw. There's different forms. I would say JSON is the most used. And in n8n here, you can either insert key value pairs, or you can insert pure JSON just by typing the code in there. So this is pretty much the HTTP request node. On the other end, you have the webhook request or the webhook node. So in a way, these are doing pretty much very similar things, but on different sides of the equation. So this is listening for incoming messages coming from somewhere into n8n, whereas this is sending information from n8n somewhere else. So with this one, you have some things that are similar. So there's the different methods. So you can have multiple different methods allowed there. And over here, we have the same methods that we were looking at before. Again, the most common would be get and post. You have the ability to have test URLs and production URLs. So if you're testing and developing, you would generally use the test URL, whereas with production systems, then you would flip to the production URL. The only difference is what we have right here, the dash test part. So if I flip to production, this changes to without the dash test part. You have the path, so you can fully customize the actual webhook right here if you wanted to. You can have authentication, so not anyone can pretty much connect to your webhook, but they would need to have some sort of authentication, whether it's a basic authentication, some sort of header, it's a JWT token. So there's different authentication that you can use. And another important thing is the response. So you can either respond immediately, or one very useful feature would be the respond to webhook node, because many times you wouldn't want to send an answer back to whoever is asking you for information immediately. You would want to have a sequence of events. So let's say we have item 1, then we have another item, then we have another item, and then at the end we want to respond back to whatever source this information came from. So for that, we would then use a respond to webhook node. So if we flip the switch here to respond using webhook respond to webhook node, then this will be responsible for sending the information back to the source where the initial request came from as a form of response. So this is also pretty handy to know, the respond to webhook node. And this is also pretty straightforward. You can respond with the incoming item. So in this case, it would be the item coming in from here. You can respond with specific JSON. So you could say, I know, response is equal to whatever value you have there. There are different ways how you can respond back to the stuff that comes through here. So this is the webhook node, so super handy as well. The next one, third node that is super useful is the edit fields. Some people call it the set node as well. And there are different modes right here. And what this does is it allows you to essentially grab relevant information and use it in your workflow. So if I wanted to only grab relevant data such as name, email, and I don't know, phone number, I can use this edit fields in order to grab the data from any node that comes before it. When we get information sent through a webhook, for example, so if I show you an example, if I start this webhook, so now it is, or it would start listening for information. Let's see, webhook, let's remove the authentication right here. Listen for test events, great. So now if I grab this URL and listen for test events and I send some information, so name equals Kevin and location equals Malta. Okay, we need to change this back to immediately so that we can test this out. Change this to no authentication and let's send that once more. So if we now send this, we get the webhook information in n8n. So as you can see, there's a lot of information. There's host, user agent, accept, encoding, language. We don't really want to keep all this information flowing through. What we're interested in is this part right here. So if we were to use that set node that I was just showing you and connect it like so, we can grab specific information, which in our case would be the name and the location. So then moving forward right here, we only have these two. If we wanted, we would even make this more of a flat sort of output. So if we just change this to name and location instead of query dot, that would be sort of a flat sort of output right here. So it's even more convenient for us to then access those variables later on. So this is the set field, super handy as well. You can also use it like so to very quickly change stuff if you want to not have to send data again. So now I changed Kevin to John so I can manipulate data as needed. So this is the edit fields node. The next node I want to cover is the switch node. And again, super, super useful in the sense that here you can have multiple routes, let's say 1, 2, 3. And this will allow you to take your automation in different directions. So you can say if, for example, the name is Kevin, then we'll go down this route. If the name is John, we'll go down this route, and so on and so forth. And you can theoretically have as many different routes as you need or as you want. Each time, this will add a new branch right here. So it will allow you to have many forks in the road that can take your automation in different directions. So super handy, super convenient. And like if you put it after this one right here, you can very easily see how if the name that we got from the webhook is whatever, we go down this route. So you can also see how all this starts building together. And you can then say, okay, if it's this, then we send a request to whatever. But if it's something else, we send the request somewhere else. So I hope you can start to see how things connect together here in n8n. The next super useful node is this AI agent, and it has a bunch of stuff coming out of it, which might look intimidating, but it's super handy once you understand it. Just there's a bit more to it than the, let's say, simpler nodes like the edit fields. So if we look into this, we have parameters, we have settings. What I want to focus on are the source for prompts. So here you can either use a chat coming into this, which I won't go into this chat in this video, but you can have a chatbot that ties in directly into the AI agent. Alternatively, you can have input coming in from somewhere else, right? So let's say that we connect it like so. So now the input would be coming from the edit fields. So we wouldn't have a connected chat trigger, but it would be something that is defined below so that we can then insert, for example, the name of the person from the previous node. The other thing is that you can use, or you can have another branch coming out of this AI agent if you choose require specific output format. So this added this output parser right here. It's not something that I find super handy, and unless it's very structured, I would rather not have this. But if you want a very specific output, this is something you can look into. Another thing that would also increase the number of branches coming out by 1 here is this fallback. So by default, you don't get that. You enable it, you get the fallback model. And that is the brain of the AI agent. So let's say we give this OpenAI, right, as the main brain right here. But what happens if OpenAI is down? You can go back, or it can sort of fall back to the fallback agent, as the name implies. So let's say we have Anthropic here, which now means that if OpenAI is down, this will then use the Anthropic chat model brain, which is super handy. Another useful branch to this AI agent is the tool, because this connects you to pretty much all of this that you can have in an n8n. Plus, in addition to all the things you see right here, so in addition to all the tools you can arm this agent with, you can also use the HTTP request tool that we looked at right here. So this will also open up all the different possibilities that are not listed as part of this list, which can be pretty much anything on the internet. So when you combine the AI agent with the HTTP request, you're giving your agent the ability to go to any source on the internet that has an API and get data for you and do it dynamically without you having to hard code stuff, which is a super powerful skill to have. The final thing here is memory. If I click into that, there's simple memory, which is n8n's inbuilt memory. However, if you want to get more advanced, you can also have things like Postgres, which is something that Supabase uses. So with that, you can have an n8n chat histories, which would be a table in your Supabase, where you would have the interaction between the human and the AI, which is super handy if you want to have or to arm your agent with memory. So it's not just have the context about the current conversation. It would also have what happened in past memories. So again, if we keep building this whole web that we're building right here, you could have something that comes through the webhook. You grab the relevant information, you do something with that information using AI. Then, based on that output, you would send the information somewhere, or if the output is something different, you would send it somewhere else. So again, I hope that you can start seeing how all things connect together. Now, let's go to the final two pieces right here, which are, first, we have the loop over items. So let's say that over here from the edit fields, we got a bunch of data. It's not just one item. And what we want to do is we want to iterate over each and every item instead of doing it in batches. This is where the loop over items comes through. So we can connect to the loop over items. And this has two branches. It has the loop and it has the done. And the flow is that anything within the loop would do the thing, and then it would go back to the next item in the list. Once all the items in the list are done, obviously it goes down the done path, right? So what we could have, for example, would be something like this. So we get, let's say, a bunch of items right here. So let's say that instead of just one item right there, we get more than that. So we get another name. Let's put Kevin, and we get location. Let's say, I don't know, UK. Let's close that out. Hit save and put a comma there. So now we got two items right there as output. So we can either process these as a batch if we were to do this like so. If we were to do it like this, we would pass two items here. This would take batch sizes of 1. So it's going to do them one at a time. So now we got one item that was passed through to the AI agent, which would be the first item in our list right there. So this means that if we had this sort of flow right here, we would process each item at a time, or one item at a time. It would go through the AI agent. It would decide what sort of output we have in order to conditionally go down one route or another. We would send the information somewhere, and when that is done, we would go back to the loop over item, and then we do the second one. Once these two are done, it would then go down the done route. So down the down route right here, just showing you as an example with the no operation, we would get two items. So this would have run 3 times. So this is the loop over items. Finally, we have the code in JavaScript, which in most cases you do not really need, but there are some situations where it is super handy, and it can be a sort of a quick fix over anything that you might be having issues with. And what this allows you to do is run programming languages, and at the moment there's JavaScript and Python, and this will allow you to have code here that does something with your data. So you can generally have any sort of, let's say you want to extract something or you want to do something that might be difficult to do with the nodes that I showed you. This code in JavaScript can help with that. So in this case, by default, you get this loop over input items and add a new field called myNewField to the JSON of each one, just as a sort of placeholder code right there. So this can be, again, like the duct tape to fix problems within a specific workflow. It is a bit of a patch, so I would also, as much as possible, try to understand what's happening rather than just rely on this. However, there are situations where you have, I don't know, maybe complex data, and like over here, we try to simplify it, having this sort of flat structure. If you have complex data and you want to extract something very specific, this code in JavaScript can really get the job done. So those were the 7 nodes and sort of the things that you would add to them in order to build the foundation, let's say 90% of any sort of automation. Before we conclude this video, what I wanted to mention are these 2 triggers, because they are super handy as well. So by default, you start with this when clicking execute workflow. That allows you to just run that, and that will execute each time that you click execute, right? Pretty straightforward, super handy as you're developing. However, it's not super practical when a system is in production, because you're not going to come in here and click execute workflow each and every time. So in that case, you would have different triggers. For example, the webhook is a trigger. Another super handy trigger is the schedule trigger. So if I look here, I have the options like seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months. And I'll also speak about the cron in a second. These are all pretty straightforward, right? Because let's say we want days, we want 1 day between each trigger, and we want to trigger it at 3 a.m. So we know that each day at 3 a.m., exactly at 3 a.m., this would trigger each and every day. So that's pretty straightforward. Here we also have this cron. So if we look at the documentation or at this cron tab.guru, you can see different cron formulas that you can utilize. So let's say you want to run something every night at, I don't know, every Friday at midnight. There is this cron formula that allows you to grab it, go into n8n and just paste this thing. So this means that every day at midnight, so on the 0 hour, the 0 minute, which is midnight, every day of the week or every day of the month, all months, but on Friday, we run the workflow. So once you connect this to the rest of the workflow, this will run this automation at the specified time. Here you can also play around with this, right? So at 10 p.m. on every day of the week from Monday through Friday. So you get that. Minute 23 past every second hour from 0 to 20. So there's all that can be done right here. If you have a specific use case, you can also go to ChatGPT or Claude and ask for a cron formula for that. And it is super, super handy. So one thing or one good thing to have in your n8n tool or arsenal. So those were the nodes that I think if you can really master them will get you a long way in your n8n and automation building journey. And when you start realizing how they work, you can also start thinking logically about how to best use them and put them together. Because obviously the power lies in, number one, knowing how each of them work. But even more when you can start thinking about how you can connect them to get the data from the input source, the processing part, and then what happens at the very end, whether it's an HTTP request or storing to a database or whatever it might be. So that's it from my end. Hope this was useful. Check out the next video in terms of how to use n8n and build automations that work. It will go into how to get a meeting transcript that can be utilized in so many different ways, where you can chat with it, you can get the output of any meeting that you had, where I build the whole system step by step. So check it out. In the meantime, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. I'll speak to you soon.